All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm sure people will join us as we go on, but um, I just want to welcome everyone to this first virtual nature journaling class. We're very excited to have you all in our virtual classroom here. My name is Kristen Barker. I'm the community education coordinator here at the Garden. And so I'm going to be kind of acting as a facilitator of the class today. So with that, I just want to go over a few of the, before I kind of hand you over to your wonderful instructor, Brittany, I want to go over kind of just the format of the class for today. I want to encourage you all to use the Q&A and the chat features here. You know, Brittany will be presenting her screen to you all, but we will be pausing periodically to address your questions if it's something that I can't just quickly answer in the chat for you. So, you know, please feel free to use those Q&A and chat features here. Also, I want, you know, feel free to take notes, but I do want to let you know that we will be recording this presentation. So, you know, don't worry if you miss something. It'll be available on our digital content page of our website, which is calbg.org. So you can find it there after the class. I hope to have that up soon, you know, definitely by Monday, if not before. So go ahead and check it there or on our YouTube page. And kind of in line with that, Brittany is also going to be providing a PDF version of her PowerPoint presentation today. So you'll see her notes and you'll have that whole presentation to reference as well, which is great. So yeah. Also, lastly, you know, we want to make this as interactive as possible with Q&A and the chat, but also Brittany is going to make her email available to you all after the class, and we encourage you to, you know, take a picture of the work that you make today, you know, your illustration and your journal entry, and send that over to Brittany, and she'll kind of provide some feedback and tips and tricks as you kind of continue on in this, you know, nature journaling adventure. So yeah, please do that. I think it will be great to get that feedback from her. And I'll be sending all of this in a follow-up email, so you know you'll have all this information as well. And so I think with that, that's kind of it in housekeeping of the class. I guess I'm going to hand you over to your instructor for today, Brittany Burgard. She is an amazingly talented botanical illustrator, and I encourage you all to go check out her website after the class. She has beautiful work there. And you know, she was also previously the curatorial assistant here in the herbarium at the Garden. So you know, she can combine the plant science botany world with the artistic side and, you know, put that all together in nature journaling. So I can't imagine a better person to kind of guide us through this nature journaling class today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Brittany. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. And thank you all for being here. Very happy to be gathering virtually with you all. And I guess we'll just begin. So what is natural history? According to E.O. Wilson, it is virtually the whole world around you. It is the vista of a great forest from a mountaintop and a swath of weeds growing along a city sidewalk. It is the breaching of a whale and the protozoans teeming in algae in a drip of pond water. Everywhere the world is alive, awaiting exploration by those who prefer, if only at intervals, real reality to virtual reality. To be a little more explicit about what natural history is, it's basically any systematic inquiry into the natural environment. So this is multidisciplinary. It encompasses everything from art and culture to the morphology of botany, botanical plants. It does tend to be more observational than experimental. So it often isn't considered a hard science, but hard science does require observation to work. And really this curiosity that humans have had about their environment, I'm sure has existed for as long as humanity has existed. But our first written evidence of natural history comes about by the like ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, like Aristotle, Pliny the Elder, and has continued throughout our history. So here is an example of Alexander von Humboldt's work. He was a very influential scientist. His work influenced people like Charles Darwin, Henry Walter Bates, Alfred Russel Wallace, Simon Bolivar, Thoreau, Ernest Haeckel, and John Muir. So this is one of his earliest attempts to represent in a visual format a scientific concept. So he was documenting the change of vegetation up the elevation of the Tenerife in the Canary Islands. So natural history illustration is all about observing and illustrating subjects from nature, science, and culture, and usually the intersection of all those different components. So this includes a very wide range of subject matter. And really the links to your subject's environment are generally the focus of natural history illustration. And this assists scientists in identifying, describing, classifying species, as well as explaining technical concepts that can be difficult to understand or describe with just words. So here are some beautiful examples of natural history illustration by Ernest Haeckel. Musica here is, I believe it's all mosses, and then Trochilidae is the hummingbird family. And if you're curious, I encourage you to look up more of his illustrations online. He he studied marine life, and he has really amazing illustrations of like diatoms and things like that. So journals are important tools in science and in natural history. You are able to record and preserve whatever has been seen, done, and thought in a journal. And this provides reliable documentation of past events, usually better than anyone's memory, and it jogs your memory. So the example here, I remember this day pretty well as a result of having made this journal entry, and going back and reading it is a fun thing to do, to remember what exactly I did on that day. And so keeping a journal sharpens and focuses skills of observation. It prompts you to ask questions and kind of dive deeper into the world around you. And then obviously improves your documentation skills as you create those journal entries. So nature journaling is really just observing the world around you and recording that observation down, and any reflections that come up as you observe. It is as individual as each of us. So really journal however you want to journal. But it usually involves art, writing, which is what we'll be focusing on today. But you can also take audio recordings, you can take photographs and videos. And really it's just a process of slowing down and looking at the world around you. And for me, it helps bring out a sense of wonderment and curiosity in my life, and allows a sense of self-expression that I don't really get anywhere else. It's really a never-ending process of creative learning. So for example, here, this journal entry, I drew this ponderosa pine cone, and noticed that there was a little hole in where one of the seeds had been eaten by an insect. And so that prompted me to wonder if pine cones, similar to oaks will drop their acorns if they sense that an insect has infested, like laid its eggs in the acorn, so that the larvae will consume the acorn meat. And so the oaks will drop those acorns. And so I wondered if pines have any kind of similar ability or sense of that kind of thing going on in their cones or not. So a natural history approach to nature journaling is a combination of the more art-minded side of things and the science-minded side of things. And this synergistic combination enhances both fields, and really they would both be impoverished without the other. Science needs accurate and precise visual representation of information, and natural history art needs science to help understand the subjects that are being drawn. And science also needs that, I think, that sense of wonderment and curiosity to inspire and propel the more hard science, little nitty-gritty aspects of it. So here is an example of a page in some of Darwin's notebooks. So he was documenting short and long styled plants. The style is the column that supports the stigma, the female reproductive, the receptive portion of the female reproductive part of a flower. So the pollen will land on the stigma, and the style holds that up in the air. So scientists are always taking notes, and having a visual aspect to those notes is helpful. So natural history journaling. The goal is not to make a pretty picture, it's to observe and record information. I don't want you to, the pressure for something pretty or feeling like you don't know your subject material well enough to discourage you from making a journal entry. It's really all about looking at the world around you and trying to depict it on the paper. And similarly, worrying about spelling and grammar often impedes the flow of your observations, though it is, of course, important to be able to read your notes and understand what exactly you have written down. And so really a journal entry is a success if it has sparked your sense of curiosity and wonder, and has allowed you to see something more clearly or in more detail, or wonder more about it, inspire you to go and research a little bit more about whatever you have drawn. And so again, journal about whatever you want, really. Even if you never learn scientific terminology, journaling can be really rewarding. You can journal exclusively about how the changing colors of the sky make you feel, for example. Really whatever excites you and gets you outside. So whether that's weather, the equinoxes, the solstices, moon phases, phenology, which is the timing of life cycle events in living organisms. So for example, when plants bud, bloom, take seed, drop their leaves, the timing of insect emergence, growth, or reproduction, the timing of bird migrations. You could also document the phenology of your houseplants, the behavior of your pets, your garden plants. This example here, I was journaling about some kale that I was growing. And you'll notice in the picture that there are some clips on that notebook. And if you are journaling outside in a windy place, that can be very useful. But if you are still having trouble figuring out what to journal about, you can follow a framework to get you started. And that pretty much I would encourage you to always start with, I mean, you don't have to include your name, but the date and time and location of where you're at, so that when you go back and look at your entries, you'll know exactly where you were. The date and time will influence whatever you're journaling about. Is it morning time when a lot of morning or evening when wildlife is generally more active? Timing can influence when flowers are open. Of course, time of year influences what, if a plant is flowering or fruiting or just in a vegetative state, or dormant. So that's a very good thing to note down. You can also note down the weather, and then take a few minutes to silently orient yourself to what's around you. What do you hear? What do you see? What do you smell? How do these things make you feel? And then usually if you have taken a few moments to kind of look around, something will probably catch your eye that you'll want to spend some time drawing. And so we'll start with that today. We'll write down our name, date, where we're at, and what the weather is like where we're at.
Brittany, as you're doing that, I just want to encourage everyone to, if you have any questions thus far, to go ahead and write them in the chat, and we can kind of go over any questions you may have also. But I do think that's such a great point, just to, encourage people to get out and just slow down and observe what is around and not feel daunted by knowing the scientific names of plants or a plant being too complicated. Just getting out there and observing and journaling. That's such a great thought. So I know that some people were joining us from Tustin and Temecula, and largely a lot of us were from Claremont and Laverne and Rancho, so very local to where we are here today, which Brittany is writing down, but maybe there's a difference in where you are today.
And my weather app says it's 77 degrees out. No questions so far?
Doesn't seem like it. We do have somebody joining us from Berkeley who has a different weather. It's foggy with a touch of wood smoke, which is not great, but yeah, no questions really. So I think we can keep going.
All right. And here is some more prompts just to kind of get you into the mindset of observing the world around you. And I'm not going to go through all of these today since we do have our subject material already, but this will be here for your reference in the PDF that you'll receive. So before we continue with our journal entries, we'll just go over a little bit about the basics of drawing accurately. And really that comes down to repetition, repetition, repetition. Andrew Howell says to draw an object accurately, you have to touch it, analyze it, and understand it. And so really the more you draw something, the better you'll understand it. And as you see here in this example, I was struggling to draw a dog paw and legs, and so I had done it a number of times and never really got it quite right, but it at least helped a little bit. And so another thing is to spend more time looking at your subject matter than you do at your paper, so that you aren't drawing what you know, you are drawing what you see. You're taking that time to look closely and observe what you're drawing. So always make several sketches of your subject material. And here you'll see I drew, this is a penstemon fruit, and I drew it from a couple different angles, including looking at it from above. And this not only allows you to get to know your subject better, as well as practice drawing techniques, it also provides a range of information, so you can see that the fruit is a little different shape depending on which angle you're looking at it from. And so all those different angles and different parts of whatever you're drawing, it's good to include all that kind of information. And here's another example where you can see I was drawing this little succulent plant, Andromyscus cristatus, and it had these strange, almost like paw-like fat succulent leaves, and so I drew it again and again to try to get that shape right, as well as 2 different angles on the lithops there. And then here again, it's just different angles of this strange little flower of a paintbrush species, Castanea excerta. Yeah. So common mistakes with drawing. Don't think of your drawing as a pass-fail. Every drawing is a learning experience. If you learned something, even if it's just about your subject material and nothing about drawing, then your journal entry is a success. I encourage you not to erase it. It destroys information that you collected, as well as documentation of your progress as an artist. Working in pen or marker or some kind of permanent drawing utensil will discourage you from erasing as well. And then here on the side, you can see that I drew this flower repeatedly, trying to get the shape down, and never really succeeded in any of those drawings, but did later. So it just takes practice, lots of practice again and again. More mistakes are making tiny drawings. The larger that your drawings are, the more detail you can include in them. And so you can see here that I drew this leaf blade of a grass very large, which was good. So I could include the details such as the ligule and the hairs along the edges. But where I went wrong is focusing on detail before shape and proportion. So I was focused on getting those details down and didn't really, I kind of just made like a quick loose sketch and didn't measure anything. So it's a little bit wonky, the drawing is. So getting down your shape and proportion correctly before you focus on detail makes sure that your drawing will be accurate. So draw lightly and with ghost lines, basically loosely and lightly, and then darken whatever lines you like as they emerge. The exception to making large drawings are landscapes. If you try to do a landscape too large, you'll tend to try to include too much information. Whereas if you draw like a tiny landscape, a couple inches, that will force you to focus on the forest rather than the trees, basically. You can pick out just a few elements of the landscape to focus on so that your drawing is legible in the end and doesn't include too much detail. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to our warm-up exercises. And first we'll be doing blind contours, which is just drawing a continuous line without looking at your paper. So you'll be looking at your subject material the whole time as you draw, and then once you're done, you can look at your paper. And this is like a fun little warm-up to do. It generally results in some pretty silly drawings. So you can pull out whatever you'd like really to use. Generally with warm-ups, you want to start with a more simple subject material, such as this buckeye fruit, California buckeye, Aesculus californica. They come in, it seems like a pretty broad range of shapes, but here we have kind of a round one. And just since the image is on my screen, it'll be a little hard for me to do a blind contour, but I will give it a try.
So Brittany, someone's asking if you recommend starting with a pen or pencil.
Whichever you prefer, really. You could do a pen, since there really won't be any need to erase with the contour drawings.
Great.
Okay. Now we'll move on to our next subject material. We have some acorns here, and we'll do some more blind contours. I don't know the species of this oak. Oaks can be kind of challenging sometimes to key out. They tend to hybridize really readily, so it can be difficult to figure out exactly what you're looking at. But yeah, if you have an acorn or a similar subject material, you can draw that.
So Brittany is drawing on a tablet right now to present onto the screen. Brittany, is it a little tricky to do that?
A little bit. I kind of hold my hand over where I'm drawing so that I can't see for
Right.
the blind contours.
Kind of like blind drawing a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And for our last blind contour, we'll do the Matilla poppy seed pods. Bromnia coulteri is the species. They're really beautiful, interesting plants. And if you did get a journaling kit and you have the Matilla poppy pods. You can see the seeds that have fallen out of mine. I would encourage you to go plant those if you want a large, beautiful shrub on your property.
Brittany, can you repeat the Buckeye scientific name?
Aesculus, is it Californica? Here, we'll just go back quickly. Yeah, Californica. It's down in the bottom left corner there. Aesculus californica, and that's in the Sapondaceae family. I believe soapberry is the common name for that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Kind of strange alien things. Okay, and so for our next warm-up, we'll be doing modified contours, and this is similar, but where you draw a continuous line, you don't lift your pen off the paper as you're drawing, but you can take some quick peeks at your paper. And so we are going to do another Buckeye fruit, and they do come in an interesting range of sizes and shapes. This one is not quite as round. It's a little more of a double. Rounded. Okay, so we'll do acorns again, and I flipped them over so that you can kind of see the underside of the leaf as well. It's a little different color and hairier as well. And I do like to warm up before I draw, just to kind of get my hands and my brain focused on the topic. Just like with anything, any kind of physical activity, warming up is useful. And oaks are in the Fagaceae family. And these acorns might belong to Quercus durata or Quercus barbaritifolia, or neither of those. I really don't have a lot of practice keying out oaks, but okay. And for our last modified contours, we'll do the Matillaha poppy seed pod again. And the flowers of this plant are beautiful. They're huge white flowers with a large yellow center, so they kind of look a bit like fried eggs. The foliage is also really beautiful. It's like a blue-green color, which is kind of one of my favorite colors that plants tend to come in, is the sort of blue, gray, green range. Okay, so now we're going to do quick gesture drawings. And so this is where you attempt to capture the form of your subject material as quickly as possible. And this time we'll do our California buckwheat, Eriogonum fasciculatum. And I probably will just do the inflorescence, the whole flowering structure, rather than the entire stem and the leaves at the bottom, just because it is so large. But feel free to do what works for you. In this picture, these flowers are a little past their blooming stage. They turn this kind of beautiful rusty color, I guess once they've been fertilized. But when they're fresh, they're white with sometimes a little pink tinge, especially down the mid vein of the little petals there. Buckwheat is another set of plants that are often difficult to ID. I'm not sure if they hybridize as readily as oaks, but I think also some hybridization occurs, which makes things a little complicated. Okay, so now we'll move on to some pine cones. So this is the pine cone of gray pine, Pinus sabiniana. They are distinctive in being sort of a medium-sized pine cone. It was maybe like that big, a little spiky, and they have very, very large, dark seeds. The pine cone we'll look at next is a much larger pine cone, but with much, much smaller seeds. So it's kind of a funny, interesting thing. And I'll show you a little trick to kind of quickly capturing a complex form like a pine cone or even like a pineapple. So you have, I mean, you've got your basic oval shape. But then if you look at the scales, you can kind of see a pattern where there's a row of scales, a row of scales, a row of scales. And it gets to be a little less easy to see the rows as the pine cone curves down, but especially up here near the top where you're looking sort of directly at the scales, the pattern is easier to pick out. And then you go back the other way. And then you can see that each scale falls into your little diamond shapes that are created so that you can more easily and quickly draw something complicated like a pine cone. And I'll just erase the marks I made on the pine cone so that I can see the scales a little bit easier as I draw them. And for these quick gesture drawings, you don't need to focus on getting things exactly right. It is a warm-up just to kind of get you going.
You can really see how helpful those guiding lines are as you draw those scales, because it looks so daunting before, but then you can kind of just place them in their right little spot. And you, like, even after just 4 scales that you drew, I could see the shape of the pine cone forming and like how accurate it was. So that's a great tip.
Yeah, it really, really helps. And pretty much all plant parts can kind of be simplified into these geometric forms. And the more often you do it, the easier it gets for you to see those sort of simple shapes that you can use as guides. Yeah, it's very helpful. We'll move on now to our next pine cone, and I actually have this one here. They're very large, spiky pine cones. It would definitely hurt if this fell on top of you. And this is coulter pine. Pinus coulteri. And so that other cone, the seeds were probably like that big around, whereas the seeds on this, most of what you would, or which you see here, is the wing. And then there's just this little seed at the tip. But yeah, really large pine cones. And with this one, you can do the same kind of thing. It is a little bit more complicated just because they have the scale has such a long, pointed, curved tip. But the main part of the scale, this kind of part here, does still follow a similar pattern. So that is very helpful. And this one's a little bit more kind of bell-shaped. And that pattern is also a bit steeper. And pine cones are definitely a complicated thing to draw. So if you're getting frustrated, just know that they are very challenging and not necessarily a beginner subject. Especially a pine cone as complicated as this one. They kind of look like little elephants, the scales, little elephant heads.
Yeah, I see that little side profile.
And that kind of observation, if something looks to you like an elephant head, feel free to write that in your journal.
Brittany, do you happen to know if this pine cone's also known as the widowmaker? I feel like I've heard that before, and someone is asking.
I feel like I have as well, yeah. They're so large and heavy and spiny.
Right.
Yeah.
I can attest to collecting these and even just carrying a few in my arms getting scratched already. So just even lightly holding them, you can kind of feel the kind of intensity of them.
Okay.
So Brittany, I have a question that they're asking, is there a pattern of dark triangles curving out from the center? Would you add that in this kind of drawing?
Yeah, there is a bit of the scales do make that kind of triangular shape. And if you wanted, you could include that. You could kind of add like a dark triangle between the scales. Though generally with my warm-ups, I do tend to just do like simple line drawings. But yeah.
Great.
And if focusing on that kind of, I get the negative space as opposed to the actual subject material, if that helps you visualize the different shapes and patterns going on, then definitely use whatever is most helpful to you. Okay. So now we'll move on to our diagrammatic drawing. And if you didn't finish your pine cones, feel free to go back and work on that later if you'd like. But we're going to kind of move to our star of the show with diagrammatic drawing is kind of the way that you do a nature journal. Usually you include as much information as possible within your drawing. And so today we'll be doing sunflower. This is the common sunflower, Helianthus annuus. I believe it's also the species that that is harvested and grown for sunflower seeds that are sold commercially. It's actually the only native North American species that has become a major agronomic crop. It's an annual. And it readily hybridizes with many of the other annual sunflower species. So first we will be focusing on our vegetation. And when you're drawing leaves that have the edges called the margin of the leaf, you'll notice these little like teeth, and kind of the easiest way to draw those is to just do the shape of your leaf first. And then you can go back in and add your little teeth. This can be especially helpful for something like raspberries, for example, or the margins are very serrate. And so trying to draw the whole shape with those teeth first, it can be challenging. So I'll include a little bit of the venation on the leaves. And so the top of the leaf is called the adaxial surface. And this bottom side of the leaf over here is called the abaxial surface. And both sides are a little bit hairy. You can feel that texture between your fingers. And if you have a hand lens, you can take a look at the hairs, it does look like the bottom of sides of the leaves, or especially the veins, have all these little hairs. The proper term for hairs in botany is trichomes. So
Brittany, can you repeat the difference between adaxial and abaxial?
yeah, so adaxial is the surface of the leaf, the upper surface, the surface that points towards the stem. And the abaxial surface is the bottom side of the leaf, the side that points away from the stem. And they can be different, and that can be a distinctive feature of a certain plant species, is whether, for example, with that oak, the top of the leaves was like a shiny, hairless surface, whereas the bottom was kind of densely short-haired, and the color was a little different. And with these sunflowers, you'll notice that the veins are much more prominent on the underside, whereas on the adaxial surface, they're sort of flush with the flesh of the rest of the leaf. I believe it's lamella is the term for the leaf blade. And the stalk here that attaches the leaf blade to the stem is called the petiole. And these have long white hairs along the edge of the petiole. So yeah, just write down anything that you notice about your leaf, whatever your subject is. It looks like the margins on these are also hairy. So there are little hairs growing out of the margin. And a common way to indicate, so like the picture here, the leaves are a little bit serrate, so they have a few teeth. But these ones here have more teeth. I don't know how easy it is to see exactly, but there's more teeth along this particular individual. And because this is such a widespread common species, it can be found pretty much worldwide at this point. There is a lot of variation in how each individual looks. But so you can do this plus or minus serrate and hairy. Some of these stems are also like mottled purple. Some are just a pale green. I have some buds here as well, and the tips are a little purple.
Brittany, so can you explain what you mean by the plus and minus when describing the serrate?
Yeah, so this picture, there's only like a couple of teeth along it. Whereas this other one that I have is got many teeth kind of all along it. So some individuals have more teeth, some have less teeth. So it's kind of plus or minus serrate leaf margins. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that answers the question. Great,
Okay.
great. Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. Cool. And I think that'll be all that we'll do for the vegetative parts. So we'll move on to the flower.
Before we move on, I just want to ask if there were any other questions about that aspect, or I feel like we were able to kind of chat about them and answer them as we were doing it, but just before we go on, make sure.
Trichomes are the hairs, yes.
Okay.
Also,
and then, oh, sorry, Brittany, do you have any advice for drawing axillary buds?
I will often draw them a little larger than they are, just to emphasize that they're there, and then make a note of that usually in my drawing. Most of the plants that I have here, the axillary buds have actually already branched. So here's an example where the axillary bud is just starting to branch and put new leaves up. So axillary buds are between a leaf and the stem. So I guess that's really all I have to say about them.
Okay.
But yeah, knowing that they're there is a good thing. And also wear on your plants. So these are alternate leaf. You have a leaf to one side and then a leaf to another side. Or opposite leafed, sorry. These are opposite, whereas alternate, this is alternate. And opposite would be if there was a leaf exactly opposite this other one on the on the other side of the stem. So mints, for example, are famously opposite leaves and square stemmed. Whereas this is alternate, where you have leaves to either side of the stem. You can also have whorled leaves, where there's any number more than 2, so 3 upwards, all around the same spot on the stem.
Great. And for this, is there a term that, like, what would you say the leaf shape is?
The leaf shape, there is a term, and I think it's lanceolate, like they're sort of lance shaped, but I could be wrong about them. There are a lot of different terms for the shape of a leaf, but I believe it's lanceolate, as in like a lance head, where you've got this wider base that comes to a point, and the point would be acute, so it's generally tapered up to a sharp point.
And if you didn't know the term for the shape of the leaf, is there some sort of way you would note that in your journal entry, or?
Yeah, I would probably just write down lance shaped with a question mark behind it. But also your drawing will, you draw the shape of the leaf, you'll have that information that you can then go back and figure out exactly what the proper term is. And there's a resource list at the end of the PowerPoint that has a book of morphology terms, and it's an excellent book. It's illustrated, so it has pictures of every term drawn. There's a section for leaf shape and flower type and things like that.
Great. Okay. I think that's all the questions we had for the vegetation, so whenever you're ready.
All right, and with a radial flower like this. So radially symmetrical, meaning that you could fold it basically at any point and it would be pretty much symmetrical to either side. So if you were to like fold it in half, it'd basically be the same. The sides would match up. A good trick to do that is you can just do your circle, your basic geometric shape, and then make little tick marks where each petal is, whether you've got, you know, like upwards of 10, 15 as we do here, or 3 or 4. That's a useful trick. And similarly, you can also do another circle in the center there for the disc for its. And if it helps as well, you can always extend your tick mark down. You can extend it down and also do tick marks to either side to sort of indicate where the petal goes. That can all be useful. And these petals tend to have 2 prominent veins. So adding that can add a little bit of, at least a little bit of an appearance of some depth. And rather than go draw each petal one after the other, you'll notice that some are on top of the others, so I'll draw the one behind after the others. And so there you've got the basic shape of your flower. I'll maybe just do a couple spots to indicate the pollen. And then I'll just dot a little bit to suggest the center of the head. But feel free to make your drawing as detailed or not as you would like. I'll get to labeling these parts now. And so sunflower and all members of the Asteraceae family are very interesting flowers. They're actually a head of composite flowers. The family used to be called Compositae, named after that. So each of these petals is actually 3 fused petals of one flower. So you have one flower, one flower, one flower, one flower. And each of the little discs inside the center are also one flower. So this head is composed of many hundreds, well, maybe 100. If we wanted to do an estimation game of number count, many 100 of flowers. So they're pretty amazing plants. They're very interesting. So we will label the different types of flowers. Okay, black. So these petal-like flowers are called the ray flowers or florets. Some people will call them florets. And I'll just write florets because it's shorter. And then the center are the disc flowers. And so those don't have these long petals. If you take a look at them closely, especially with your hand lens would help, you can actually see 5 individual petals, sort of like a typical flower. And so that is, well, I guess I'll also include the stem, which is called the peduncle. It's one of my favorite words, peduncle. It's such a funny word, but it's the name for a stem of a single flower or of an inflorescence.
Yeah, it sounds like a board game.
It does. Who wants to go play some peduncle?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll take a look at the back of our flowers. In Asteraceae, these bracts, the green leaf-like structures that protect the developing bud are called phyllaries, and they're usually taxonomically relevant, distinctive to whatever species. And again, in drawing this, you can make your circles and your strange egg shape for your petals, to kind of help guide you. That looks a bit like an avocado. And a trick with these kinds of things, if you want to make you can make marks at the bases of each of the phyllaries, as well as the tips, if you don't really want to, well, in addition to your circle, that can kind of help you figure out where to place these things on your drawing. So you can kind of just eyeball where those would go.
Brittany, do you know if this species can have specimens with different number of ray flowers?
Yeah, they're like this particular head seems to have fewer ray flowers than this one has more, this one fewer. And oftentimes a range of numbers will be listed. So like Eriogon or Erigeron is a genus within Asteraceae that has many, I would almost say thousands of ray florets, so many tiny thin ones, whereas this one maybe is like 10 to 15 ray flowers typically on a head. So yeah, counting things can certainly be useful, but botanists usually just have like a range, or even say something like many ray florets. Botanists don't often want to count the exact number, like probably very few people have ever counted the number of ray flowers in a head.
Right.
And so these filaries also have acute tips. My drawing is getting a little bit wonky, but that's okay. And you'll notice that there's basically this picture, it looks like there's 1 to 2 series of filaries. So you have your inner and your outer ring. So like here you would have your first series, your second series, and then it looks like there's a third in the picture. And then as well, looking at these in person, there appear to be like 2 to 3 series of filaries. And that can also be a diagnostic key, as well as the shape of the filaries, the color, and filaries will often be described with the same kind of terminology as leaf shape. So these might be maybe more like ovate-ish, so slightly egg-shaped. Again, I would need to consult my terminology book just to make sure I had the right terminology down. Sorry, I keep going forward. I'll just kind of quickly fill in some petals. So we'll label things now. You have your filaries. And they're also hairy, and it also, the margins are hairy, and that is often referred to as ciliate, margins ciliate. As well as the, again, you can use the terms like abaxial and adaxial. You mostly see the abaxial surface. You'd have to peel back to look at the adaxial surface. Yeah. All right. And so now we'll take a closer look at our disc flowers. And so if you can, I would encourage you to pull apart the heads of your flower. A razor blade or like an X-Acto knife can be helpful, but fingers and nails work just as well, especially if you're out in the field and you don't have sharp tools. But so I just ripped this ripped this in half, and that gives you an idea of what's going on inside there. And to draw that, and you probably will get a little sticky. They're pretty. They have a lot of, I guess, sap going on. So do be a little careful. But we can follow the same kind of just geometric patterns. You know, there's like there's sort of little arcs along here. You know, a little like cup shape, basically. So just looking at those sorts of geometric patterns is really helpful when you're drawing plants. So we'll start with the stem, and the receptacle is the surface that the flowers are growing on. So the filaries come off of the receptacle. The flowers come off of the receptacle. And on these plants, the receptacle is kind of an interesting white color down the center. I'm gonna start over. I don't like that. If I can erase. Oh well, I'll just keep going. I told you all not to erase. So I won't erase. I'll just kind of do a diagrammatic representation to sort of help you visualize what's going on. The flowers, my stylus. Oh no, I think this battery might have just died.
Oh no.
Well. Guess I'll just be drawing with my finger. Maybe
That works.
Okay, so there's older flowers on the edge, and you can see that they're, oh man. That the fruits are starting to develop on these darker ones on the edge. And then towards the center, they're pale and white and probably haven't been fertilized yet. And so you have each individual little ovary, and then on top of that, a flower. And if you look closely, you'll notice this kind of little bulbous bit at the bottom. That can be a diagnostic feature. Of these, of the disc flowers. And then on some of them, you'll notice this column of anthers. And Asteraceae does this interesting thing where the anthers are fused together in this column, and the stigma, the female portion of the flower, pretty much in all flowers, the male is usually sexually reproductive before the female is at reproductive stage. And so the pollen is ready first, And as the female portion grows through that column, it pushes this mass of pollen out. And so you can see on the picture where the pollen is kind of puffed up at the top there. And that occurs as the style and stigma grow through. And then you'll see on some of these, kind of on the edge, you have a two-lobed stigma. And this one is also going to open up into a stigma. And so Asteraceae, the two stigma lobes is a distinctive feature. Sometimes they're really curled, so you get two little curls, kind of just like that. But these are a little more linear and just sort of float up in the air. And so you can include in your drawing just to note, let's see if I can write with my finger. Sorry about these little technical difficulties.
That's okay. It looks great still.
And then on the older flowers that have been fertilized and the fruits are developing, those structures have fallen away. And so I'll do another one over here. I'll label the receptacle. And we can also put any of these words in the chat if you can't read my finger handwriting.
Can
So
you point out the ovary again, Brittany?
The ovary are these here. And so this ovary, this dark ones on the edge, have been fertilized and are developing into fruits, whereas these more center ones are still ovaries technically. They probably haven't been fertilized. And those ones in the center actually, there's this other structure that we'll take a look at in the next slide. It's called the palea. And it is also distinctive taxonomically, and on these, it's basically this kind of see-through membranous tissue that wraps around each individual flower. On this one that I pulled off, it's almost wrapped quite a ways around it, and it's got 3 little teeth, one large prominent one. But yeah, so on that picture, those middle ones that I pointed out are kind of obscured by the palea. And then so above the ovaries, the flowers sit. And that sort of orientation where the flower sits on top of the ovary is called inferior ovary. So the ovary is below the flower. Superior ovary is where the petals of the flower all attach below the ovary. And so the ovary is sitting basically in the center of the petals. But here we have inferior ovary, which I believe is the case for all Asteraceae. Okay. So now we will take a little closer look at all the different flowers and in the different stages. So here you do have your ray floret. And let's do, and the ray florets are often sterile in a lot of Asteraceae. Sometimes they're not sterile, sometimes they just have female parts. It can be both, but usually they aren't reproductive. They're typically just there to attract pollinators. So it's got the large petal, and they kind of wrap around each other a little bit at the base there. And this is, it looks like it's probably all 5 petals have been fused into the one ray. And then you have your sterile ovary at the base. And then these little white structures that are kind of coming off the side are also an important diagnostic feature. And that is called the pappus. And so here we have a scaly pappus. And it seems like on the ray flowers, there's actually like 3 or 4 different pappus scales, whereas on the disc flowers, it looks like they're mostly just 2 little pappus scales coming out to the side. But a scale pappus is usually just like a membranous kind of tissue, whereas a hairy pappus is hairy. And then here on the edge, is the chaff, and that's kind of the back of the chaff. So the flower would be wrapped up on the other side of this image. And it's got 3 teeth, little purple tipped. Sometimes there's no pappus, yeah, sometimes there's no pappus, sometimes it's hairy, sometimes they fall off, sometimes they persist, and can be part of the dispersal of the seeds, like dandelions, for example. The pappus is the like puff that you see that helps them disperse in the wind. So yeah, that is the palea, and the ray flower. So we can take a little closer look at our flower, our disc florets in different stages. And so I'll just draw I'll draw the one with the anther column. And some pollen up at the top there. Oops. I don't know how I erased all of it. Okay, we'll go again. Okay, so down at the bottom, we have our ovary. We have our pappus. Two scales. We have our corolla tube. So the term for all of the petals on a flower is the corolla, and these are all fused into a tube. And then our anther column. With our pollen coming out. And the flower with the stigma coming out is, well, they're all pretty much have the same parts, but we'll label that. A two-lobed stigma. So a female and our male. And then here we've got our developing ovary, developing into a fruit, darkening there. And this was older, and you can see it's kind of shorter. It was on the outer edge of the head, whereas the central flowers are a little taller. I guess just how, that's part of how they're arranged in the head. They have to be a little taller to kind of reach past each other. We have, so we can, well, let's just go to, so the fruit of Asteraceae is called an achene. Which means there's one seed inside that is attached at a single point. And I had to kind of, it was a little difficult to get a fruit that still had the pappus. So the pappus is deciduous in fruit. It falls off. And these achenes, they are a little hairy, especially near the top. They're quite small.
Brittany, do you mind repeating the scientific name of this sunflower?
Helianthus annuus, or Helianthus annuus, which is the common sunflower. And annuus refers to its annual habit. So it grows and completes its entire life cycle from germination to release of the fruits in one season, 1 year, as opposed to a perennial plant which grows for longer than typically 2 seasons. It's usually a couple years. A biannual or biennial plant usually completes its life cycle in 2 seasons. So the first season is dedicated to growth, and then the second season would be dedicated to flowering or reproduction, basically.
Great.
And some sunflowers will have different patterns on the shell of the achene. These are just kind of dark, like a dark gray to black sort of color, not particularly shiny. So, yeah. Any other questions about sunflowers or this species in particular?
I think it doesn't seem to be like there's any other questions, so.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Brittany. Did you explain the bulbous area?
I'm actually not really sure what that bulbous area is. If maybe there's nectar in there, and so there might be like nectar producing areas in there that attract pollinators. Yeah, it's curious. I would like to know more about that. Its presence or absence can be a distinctive feature in terms of IDing a species. The back of the sunflower, so the view of the filaries here.
I think so, yeah. Was there a specific aspect of the back of the sunflower that you were wanting to see again? All right. And again, just to make sure everyone knows, you'll have this PowerPoint available to you. So you'll be able to come back and look at all of these drawings and pictures. So you'll have it as well. Oh, got it. Okay. She just wanted to place petals. So that's perfect. Great.
And
there is one other question about if you know the difference between bracts and filaries.
so filaries are a type of bract. A bract is sort of a specialized leaf structure. Yeah, so a filiary is just a type of bract.
Oh. Great. So since we'll have this, we should kind of continue on, I think.
Yeah.
Great.
So it's pretty helpful to review your work and just kind of reflect on maybe what you didn't like, what you did like, and basically what you've learned. That'll kind of solidify everything in your mind, and will generally improve your learning experience. Yeah, feel free to send me whatever you'd like, and I can also comment on that. Here is a list of references that I used in making this PowerPoint, and then here is a list of resources. So the first one, the Plant Identification Terminology and Illustrated Glossary, that's an excellent resource for learning plant parts, and it's just handy. Like, if I always have it on hand if I'm keying something. The second one is useful for learning the kind of basic patterns of different plant families. And then if you're interested in botanical illustration specifically, these next three references are good books. Billy Scholl's work is very beautiful. It's a good resource for learning botany. And then at the end here, CNPS, the California Native Plant Society, has a lot of good books for sale, good field guides for various parts of California. And then John Muir Laws does a lot of nature journaling teaching. He's got a lot of videos and written references. You can buy books on his website. You can view all of his videos. Some of the resources he has are free for downloading, as well as you can make a donation. So yeah, all of those are excellent resources.
Great.
And that is it. Where are we on time? Okay,
Great.
just about.
So I guess if we have any other questions before we do that, I just want to kind of say again, yeah, we'll be making both the recording of this available on the digital content page of the CalBG website, and then also I'll be sending a follow-up email with the PowerPoint presentation, Brittany's email, and Brittany's website, and any other questions that we hadn't addressed. But so just so you all have that information, you'll be getting that after the class, an email from me, Kristen Barker. But any other questions before we kind of wrap up for today? Oh, great. Getting a lot of time to enjoy the time to practice their drawings. Oh, somebody from Minnesota. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I think I saw someone from Montana as well at the beginning when people were introducing themselves. That's great.
Great. From Alaska. Oh, wow. That's amazing. Wow, thank you all for joining us today. Yeah, we encourage you all to get out and practice what you've, all the tips and tricks that you've learned today. And, just observe and sit and be with nature. So that's the great thing about this class. There's about 60 of us today joining us in our class. And then I have a question, Brittany. When would you recommend to use ink instead of pencil?
I tend to use ink for like line drawings, and when I want to do like shading, I'll tend to use pencils just so that I can get a more even shading. I mean, you can do like cross-hatching or stippling to do your shading with a pen and ink. but it really just depends on my mood and like what I want to do. A lot of the times with a black ink, I can just come in and color over that, and so that's a nice way to add color to my drawings. Whereas with pencil, I usually just use pencil, and it'll be more of a study in the value and of whatever the subject is.
Great. Great. Is there any other questions or? Any tips on how to add watercolor?
If you're very new to watercolor, I would first start out by making like a color swatch and try to mix some colors that you can make like a full range of the colors that you can, just to get a practice for how the mixing goes and what colors you can achieve. And then and I guess just definitely use a thicker paper and kind of just go for it. It really does just take practice and repetition. Something that I had to figure out when I was first learning watercolor was how much water to have in the actual paintbrush. I had a tendency to overload my paintbrush, and so I diluted my color on the page, and there was just too much water. So finding that balance of how much moisture is in your brush can be a little bit tricky, but you'll get the hang of it as you use it. Yeah.
And so with that, would you recommend using ink before watercolor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do ink before I add the color.
Okay, great. And there's a question if we're going to have any more classes, like-minded classes like this. We hope to, and perhaps even just a botanical illustration class, or just another nature journaling class in spring or early of next year. But we will be having other classes and a lecture series on conservation, and we hope to do some horticulture classes online as well. So keep an eye out for that. Check back on our website, or if you get our email blasts, you'll be seeing those there. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Brittany, so much. This was a wonderful class. I'm so glad that you could join us here today and give us all this information. I know it was a lot to take into, but we'll have all of this available for you all to reference going forward. And yeah, I appreciate you all joining us today for this virtual class. It's great to see us, Minnesota, Temecula, Alaska. We're all joining together on this Saturday morning to just reflect and take a moment to observe the nature around us, which I think is really important. So yeah, thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you all feel inspired to get outside.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope it's spent outside a little bit practicing what you've learned. So thank you all. Have a great day. All right. Take care, everyone.